your thoughts on the Super Bowl? It did happen a week ago, so we had time to process it. So what were your thoughts?
I felt like even though the teams combined for 47 points, which is actually like a decent amount of scoring, not like a crazy amount like we saw last Super Bowl when it was just scoring all over the board. I felt like it was a really defensive game most of the time. I feel like obviously only not both teams didn't even score 20 points in regulation, and it really felt like it should have been less.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was a really good game, and anybody who
Oh
says
yeah,
that wasn't a good game probably didn't watch it because it was. I mean, it was only
yeah.
10-3 at half, but it was a really good game. In the ending was absolutely awesome. I mean, that play on the corn dog play again,
Oh
and
yeah.
to the small town kid McCole Hardman, who wasn't even on the team until week what was it
What was it?
week 7.
7?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was on the team till week 7, and you know McCole Hardman actually has a street named after him in his small town. That's how small it is, and
Wow.
he's actually he's from Bowman, Georgia, and has a population of 860.
860, very small town, but yeah. Really, one thing I thought about the Super Bowl is Mahomes just kept getting better and better throughout the game. He looked really weird in the first half and obviously had this interception to start the second half. But by the time fourth quarter overtime came around, he was just cooking almost 400 yards of offense, scored a
Yeah,
couple of touchdowns too. And I felt like Andy Reid, he really schemed up a great game plan. Some of those routes on the two touchdown plays, they tricked the 49ers defense so well. Those were wide open touchdowns. You and I could have made that throw. That's how easy he made it for his
yeah,
offense.
yeah. He did definitely did a really good job, and especially in the second half, being able to get Kelsey involved because early in obviously in the first half he had one catch for like 1 yard really, and then the second half in overtime he had
Oh, yeah.
um a 9 catch, or excuse me, he had in the second half he had 9 catches or 8 catches for 92 yards in the second half in overtime. That's incredible. And I know that Greenlaw was out, but some of those were on Fred Warner. Like,
Yeah, he played a really good game in the Super Bowl. He always comes up big in the big moments. Kind of surprised he didn't get that final touchdown there, but it was nice to see someone like McCole Hardman get it. Some guy who may never play for the Chiefs again. That could have been his last ever snap as a Chief, for all we know.
yeah, I know that was really incredible. And just one quick thing about Kelsey. So, that catch he had at the end of the fourth quarter, like I think it was like 25 yarder on Fred
Oh
Warner.
yeah, that huge running catch.
Yeah, that was the fastest Kelsey has ran in 7 seasons
Wow,
per
that's pretty
next.
crazy
Yeah,
considering the fact that he's going to be 35 here in a few months.
yeah, per next gen stats, and they have been talking about, or people have been talking about this season about Kelsey getting older and he's aging, and he's actually running. He just ran faster than he's ran in almost a decade. So it's really crazy. Um, but yeah, I mean, and then like if we talk about the Niners side of it, I really who so if the Niners would have won, do you think McCaffrey or Jennings would have won MVP?
I feel like they would have had to get it to Jennings. I mean, we a receiver passing touchdown, and he also caught one too. I mean, when you score both of your team's touchdowns, you deserve to win the MVP. I mean, that throw was just incredible. The catch was really good, and he was making plays all night. He was their best receiver on the field that game. He was better than Deebo Samuel, way, way, way better than George Kittle, and better than Brandon Ayuk. He was the best player that the 49ers offense had that day, even though
Yeah,
McCaffrey did have 160 yards.
well that was
And
that was a perfect game for him going into being a free agent. So he's a free agent right now, so that's
yeah,
perfect for him.
oh yeah. And something I wanted to touch on was I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, McCaffrey didn't get enough carries when he got 30 touches the whole game, 8 receptions, to one T2 rush attempts. I felt like the Chiefs just did a solid job of containing him on the
Yeah,
ground, not so much through the air. I felt like they were a bit too blitz heavy, even though that did pay off towards the end of regulation and on that final play of defense in overtime. So it did eventually pay off, but there were some times where it just did not work. Like that big catch he had in overtime. That if there weren't some safeties and corners downfield, that might have gone for a touchdown.
was it Shannon Sharp? Was he the one talking about how he thinks McCaffrey should have had more touches and stuff. I could be wrong. I think it was him. And he was talking about how that McCaffrey should have got more touches. And I'm just thinking like he touched the ball 30 times.
Yeah,
I mean, on offense, I'm not quite sure how many plays they ran, but it must have been at
70.
least
It was
70.
70 plays.
Yeah, so they ran 70 plays of offense, and he touched on almost half.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say about that, people are saying, yeah, I know we got 30 carries, but it's the final game of the year. Use them as much as you can. They used them pretty as much as they could. I
Yeah.
mean, if you were to use a guy 35, 40 times, I don't care what game it is, he's going to be exhausted. His last few runs are just going to be for negative yardage, and they're just going to be wasted plays.
Yeah, and that's another good thing. When you have that big of a star, you want to kind of like you don't want to just push them over and over and over and over again
Yeah.
because then they're gonna get tired, and then you're not gonna be able to use them later in the game when you really needed them. Um, yeah, so that was the Super Bowl. I mean, the Chiefs able to get out 25-22 win over the Niners, third in 5 years. That might actually play into something we talk about here in a little bit. But let's continue on with the riled up roundup. Just a small topic here: the NBA All Star Game. Um, first thing I want to discuss about that is let's talk about Steph Curry beating Sabrina Ionescu 29-26 on the 3-point showdown. What do you think this means for the sport of basketball?
Well, I think it shows that women can really play the sport very well. I mean, she's going up against the best shooter we've ever seen in the sport of basketball. Almost beat him. Just incredible for her. I mean, to even fathom that, like even 5, 10 years ago, it wouldn't have even been close. But now women's sports are evolving so fast. We see players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and a lot of players in women's college basketball that are just making a huge name for themselves.
All right, yeah. So I really do think there's a really good thing for the sport, because really it's the most possible even one-on-one matchup versus a man and a woman in a sport, really, because you take out the physicality, part of it. It's really skill based. It's just skill
Yeah.
based, and really a man and a woman. It doesn't really matter whether they're a man or a woman. It just matters who has more skill. And obviously, Curry's one of the best, one of the most skilled shooters in the history of basketball. And for her to hang with him really that entire time, it's really impressive, honestly, and it's really good for the sport, and it really opens everybody's eyes. And you see that really anybody can compete with anybody.
Yeah, and something I want to also take note on from the All-Star game and All-Star weekend, that game was just not very interesting, I thought. The players don't really have any reason to care. I mean, you should like the NBA needs to understand they shouldn't expect European players to like care about something like that, because they don't grow up in the culture of the NBA. Like obviously guys like LeBron James and Steph Curry who grew up around the NBA in America, obviously, they know about the All-Star game. They know about its legacy. But guys like Giannis, I mean, obviously he's been around for a while. Same with Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic. I just don't expect them to care in a game that doesn't matter. And I feel like what they should maybe do with the All-Star game is just maybe make like one-on-ones. I mean, that would be a lot more interesting. The players would actually try for that, and it'd probably bring up viewership a lot. So, like, I feel like that'd be a really good idea for the NBA.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea, and that definitely would help. Yeah, the All Star game, the East beat the West 211-186. So a lot of interesting score right there. For the West, Carl Anthony Towns from Minnesota Timberwolves. He led them with 50 total points. That was the most points scored by anybody in the entirety of the game. But on the East side, Damian Lillard from the Milwaukee Bucks, he's quite a star. He
Oh yeah.
had 13 points. Or not 13, excuse me, 39, not 13, 39 points. And also on the East, they had five players with 20 plus points.
Yeah, I mean, they're scoring all over the place. I mean, really, and back to my point, they didn't play any defense, even though I will say Damian Lillard was making some out of this world shots from half court. I mean, That was the one real interesting thing about the game, I thought, is his shots. And also Tyrese Halliburton just went on that crazy streak of shooting in the first quarter.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was a good offensive game. Defensively, it was not
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So I mean, well, we'll see what goes on next year. All right. Yeah. So it was a pretty good game, and we'll check it out next year. But we do have one more thing to talk about during this segment, and it is kind of a big one. The NFC champion 49ers did fire Steve Wilkes, their first year defensive coordinator. Jace, what'd you feel about this move?
I feel like this was a really good decision for them because obviously the Niners defense still top 10 unit in the league very easily. But the one thing I will say is other than the loss of Talanoa Hufanga due to an ACL tear, that defense was definitely better than the one last year that D'Amico Ryans had to work with. I mean, Chase Young and Javon Hargrave added to already a stacked defensive line. Dre Greenlaw played better. Charvarius Ward, Denora Lenore. I mean, those guys were just playing awesome at the corner position. And really, I feel like Wilkes didn't fit what the 49ers were doing. I mean, even Kyle Shanahan said it himself in a press conference that did not he didn't fit what the Niners wanted to do on defense. So I feel like that was the right decision for them. And the defense did show some regression, like in the playoffs. I thought last year in the playoffs, their defense was very solid, other than the NFC Championship. But I mean, that game, they didn't have a quarterback half the game. So you can't really expect the offense to give you much help. And that was also against a phenomenal Eagles offense. But they played really well in the playoffs last year in the first two games under Ryans. They're the best all year. And we also saw defenses adjust a lot this year. This is most defensive season we've seen in the NFL in God knows how long. And really, I liked how the players played, but I feel like Steve Wilkes didn't have great play calling, especially in the Super Bowl. Like overtime in the fourth and third quarter just did not go his way. I mean, giving up 22 points in basically like 2 and 3 quarters is just terrible in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of disagree on that. I don't like it because I feel like they did, like you said, they had a pretty good defense this year. I mean, they were really good at almost every category. They were fourth in points per game, ninth in yards per game, not too great on third down. That was an issue. 27th in third down,
Yeah.
11th in red zone touchdown percentage, fifth in rush yards per game, lowest run play percent. Okay, well that doesn't matter. But 20th in sack. Okay, that's not great. Fourth in turnovers per game. So I mean, like really, I mean, in a lot of the major categories on defense, they were pretty good. And in the Super Bowl, they held, I mean, the best player on the planet to, I mean, not incredible, too incredible game until the fourth quarter, and obviously they fell apart. But they're playing Patrick Mahomes, and we'll discuss that in a minute.
But yeah,
But well, but then obviously the run defense wasn't great the first two playoff games. They gave up. I mean, they gave up um 318 rushing yards to the Packers and Detroit, or the Packers in Detroit, um, in back-to-back weeks. But I just think they could have given him another year because you're right. You said that Shanahan said they didn't really fit their system. But I mean, I feel like that's something you can work on. I mean, unless he's too stubborn to change, because some guys are like that. Maybe that's why he got fired. But maybe they could have worked on it. I don't know. But I mean, with the talent they have on that team, it doesn't really matter who their coach is.
yeah, I feel like they need to make a smarter hire. I mean, this was 7-ish years ago, but Kyle Shanahan said, "Hey, if Bill Belichick wants to come to be the defensive coordinator, well, come be the defensive coordinator." I mean, could that be an option? We don't know right now, but I feel like the Niners are a really great organization. They've made so many savvy front office moves in the last several years, so I feel like they're going to make the right decision there.
Yeah, I definitely do. It's all in the hands of them, and I think they'll get it figured out. So now that does bring us to the end of our first segment. Roundup has come to a close, but coming up, what's cooking? What's hot? All right, so we talked about Brock Purdy and Mahomes just a few minutes ago in their Super Bowl. But how do we view them now after how the game ended? Let's start with Brock Purdy because that's a little bit of the trickier one. What do you think about him?
I think the game didn't move me about him at all. I don't feel any better about him before the game, but I also don't feel any worse. I wasn't really moved by his performance, but I also wasn't like disgusted. I feel like he could have maybe made a few better throws, but the Chiefs defense was just playing so well. And Steve Spagnuolo really called it a great game. That I don't think there could have been much more that he could have done against that defense in this game. And really, I still view him as like an above average quarterback, not some great quarterback like CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, Mark Jackson, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes. You get the point. But he is a solid quarterback in my eyes. I feel like the Niners have someone who's going to be more stable than like Jimmy Garoppolo, because obviously, other than that NFC Championship, he really hasn't been injury prone at all in his career through his first year and a half of playing. And really, I like what I see sometimes, but he can have really bad games too, and that's what you got to watch out for. He's pretty consistent, but I mean that Ravens game is just going to be like a dark shadow in his career for a decent amount of time right now.
Yeah. So the term system QB, I think that's stupid because I mean
Every quarterback's a system quarterback. They
yeah,
draft
I mean
them
like
or sign them to play in the system.
yeah, I mean like every quarterback you have to be in a good system to become a good quarterback. I mean look at the
Yeah,
Packers. I mean they've had great quarterback after great quarterback after great quarterback after great quarterback, and then look at the Bears. I mean they haven't had a great quarterback ever. I mean Jay
yeah,
Cutler, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to say. But yeah, so back to Purdy. So I really think in the Super Bowl we saw his flaws on display and how they can affect the game. About him being undersized, not too that's not a very strong arm because you could see on those blitzes when the Chiefs got there, he was done for because he's
yeah,
too small. He doesn't have enough arm strength. Like that last play in overtime on that third down, if it was Josh Allen, he would have made a perfect throw to Jawan Jennings touchdown.
yeah.
But Purdy just doesn't have enough arm strength to get it there while he's got Chris Jones all over him. And so yeah, it's just in those situations. But when he has the time to throw and he gets the ball quick on the blitz, he does good. I mean, he had a few pretty nice throws against the blitz. He had one to Chris
Yeah,
Conley, the former Chief, the 18-yarder, and then he had the 19-yarder to Ray McLeod, who he doesn't get much playing time. So I mean, pretty good throw. Both of those were against the blitz.
yeah, and
Um,
then that throw to McCaffrey in the overtime when he was getting hit was also pretty impressive.
yeah,
And one thing I will say about his performance, you're not wrong about him not having a very strong arm, but I feel like Shanahan probably should have made maybe a more simple-ish offensive plan for him. As you know, the Chiefs like to blitz a lot, and I feel like sometimes Kyle Shannon was just like, oh, they're not going to blitz, and then they blitzed. I mean, it's just what happened.
Yeah, the Chiefs definitely did bring the house a lot in that game. But yeah, again, another thing with Purdy is he can make plays like that throw to the Hughes check in overtime. That
Yeah,
was kind of questionable. I think he caught it. But that was a pretty nice play he made there.
yeah, that was a really nice play there.
And yeah, so I mean, he really he played good, not great, and I think that just plays into um his size, his arm strength. But we know he's smart enough, and he definitely
Yeah,
played better than I
definitely,
thought.
definitely smart enough.
Yeah,
He's a
and
really
he's
smart quarterback, and he's a playmaker too. That's something people like to disregard from his game. He is a playmaker. That guy can make a lot of plays on the field.
oh he definitely can, and I mean he played really pretty well for being the third youngest starting quarterback in the history of the Super Bowl at only 24 years, 46 days. Just behind Ben Roethlisberger by about like 30 days. I mean, for him, he did play much better than everybody expected, and being the Mr. Relevant and everything, it was pretty good. All right, well,
Yeah.
let's move on to the Super Bowl MVP, Patrick Mahomes. How do we view Patrick Mahomes after his third Super Bowl ring in 5 years?
I think he's probably the second best greatest quarterback of all time. I mean, I got to see a decent chunk of Tom Brady's career. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm not super old, but I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback make more plays, elevate his team more than Patrick Mahomes has. Obviously, Brady was is the smartest football player of all time. But the playmaking ability Mahomes has is just out of this world. He can turn any play into a touchdown, any play you ask him to.
Yeah, and that actually adds on to what you're saying about elevating his team. So take a look at this stat. So
And one
okay,
thing I'm also going to add is he's just a phenomenal leader. That's what makes him and Tom Brady so much different from other quarterbacks because they're great leaders, you know?
yeah. So believe it or not, so since 2001, there has been 125 drives in the postseason where the team on offense, like with at least a minute, like a minute or less remaining, where the team on offense is down by at least 7 points, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick, or excuse me, um, and only 40% win rate. Drew Brees is 3 for 6. Tom Brady is 5 for 12, and Patrick Mahomes is 7 for 7. He has never lost. So if he's on offense down by at least 7 points with a minute remaining in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, he's gonna win it. He's
Yeah.
7 for 7 in that category. It's incredible. And then in games that he's down by at least 7 at some point in playoff games, he's 9-2. And the only two losses were obviously to Tom Brady. One was D Ford being offsides,
Yeah.
whatever. And the other one was when his offensive line turned into ghosts.
Yeah. And the defense, too. Don't forget about them.
I think Mahomes. I mean, I think he definitely goes number two, number two, number three all the time. I mean, I think he's a much better player and has much better stats than Montana. I just think maybe the rings.
Yeah. The rings are there for Montana. And you also kind of got it just fair. But one thing I will say about Montana, even though it was the 1980s, he never threw for 4,000 passing yards. And
Yeah,
even guys like Joe Flacco have more all-time yards than him. So really, from a stats perspective, I mean, even though obviously his career total stats are better, Mahomes just blows him out of the water season-wise. I mean, it's not even close. And he has one less Super Bowl
yeah. And
in his history.
if we compare Tom Brady to Mahomes right now, just compare their stats. These are all through the age of 28. It might be kind of shocking. So right now, Mahomes has 16 more wins than Brady, 5 more playoff wins. He's been to one more Super Bowl, so he has one more AFC championship. He's won the same amount of rings. He's got 2 more regular season MVPs. And he's got the same amount, or he's got one more Super Bowl MVP as well. I mean, I know that Brady has the 7 rings, but if we're talking from to age 28, Mahomes blows him out of the water, except
Oh,
for
yeah.
Super Bowl.
But one thing I will say about that is, it's not exactly comparing his first. I mean, Mahomes has played more games as well. But one thing I will say is I did see a really interesting stat. You pick pretty much any 6 year chunk of Brady's career, and Mahomes has outplayed that to this point. So really, I feel like Mahomes, if he even stays at like a somewhat similar level to what he's at right now, wins maybe one or two more Super Bowls, I think he's probably going to end up as the GOAT.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. Yeah, I mean Mahomes is incredible when it comes to playoff games. And like I said earlier about being 9-2 in games where he's trailed by at least 7 points, the rest of the NFL is 11-53. So
Wow.
that's literally incredible. I mean, it's incredible what he's done. Just to wrap up, one more thing about Brock Purdy. So believe it or not, the last 17 quarterbacks who have lost their Super Bowl debut have never made it back.
Yeah.
The last 17, and that includes Donovan McNabb, Cam Newton, Joe Burrow. Obviously, I mean Joe Burrow was only 2 years ago, but he also lost. That includes Matt Ryan, like guys like that.
Yeah, really, I think, and this could actually stay true. I don't think it'll stay true for Joe Burrow. I feel like he's definitely going to make another Super Bowl. But Brock Purdy, this upcoming year for the 49ers is huge. Last chance, really. I was saying you have to pay Purdy. You have to pay so many other guys. contracts start hitting, and the team might just fall apart in a couple of years.
Yeah, that is gonna be trouble. And the last quarterback to actually go back after losing was Jim Kelly. We all know how that turned out.
Mm,
Not
that did
great.
not end well.
Um, but yeah, so that will bring us to the end of the cooking or what's hot, what's cooking segment. I had to get that out. It took a few tries. We will be moving on to knock knock. Who's there? What's hot? All right. So let's just get right down to the news that we have going on today. Justin Field trade possibilities. We know he unfollowed the Bears on Instagram.
Mhm.
Jace, what do you see there?
We see this with quarterbacks in the NFL. Obviously, Kyler Murray, a few years back, he unfollowed the Cardinals and didn't mount to anything. I don't really think this is going to mount to much. I feel like they could maybe trade him. I'm really not feeling it right now. I think he'll stay in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean they do have the first overall pick. They might trade that away. They got Justin Fields, might trade him away. And then draft Caleb Williams. But Justin Fields, he said today that he wants to stay a Bear, but obviously that's not his choice.
Yeah.
So
And one thing I will say is the Bears have been shooting down some trade offers that they've been getting from other teams for him. So I think he'll probably stay.
yeah, I think a lot of Bear fans want him to stay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And really, I don't know if it's going to be the smartest idea, but I feel like it's the most like realistic idea of what's going to happen because he likes the city of Chicago. The fans like him. He's the only playmaking quarterback they've had in like 800 years.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. Well, we got a few baseball things to get in real quick. The regular season will start in at the end of
late.
March. Like about the last weekend of March. Phillies picked up former Royal Whit Merrifield this past week. What do you think that adds their offensive situation?
I feel like it adds definitely some good depth. I mean, obviously, he was a great player at the Royals for a multitude of years. And I really just think it's a nice veteran to have some good depth and try and make a playoff push yet again. And I do think it is a good signing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, he's a veteran player. I mean, he's played in a lot of games. I mean, he has led the league in hits multiple times. He's been to 4 All-Star games. He actually went to the All-Star game last year as well as a Blue Jay. And he's been a really good hitter. He's got a lot of hits. If you need him to get a hit late in the game, you can trust him to do that, and he can coach up these
Yeah.
players they have like Bryson Stott and like all those young players that they have on that team and um coach them up and really help them develop into really good hitters. um and moving on, we so last baseball thought right here. So today is a sad day if you're a Royals fan.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Hosmer has called it quits via Twitter. He says that his playing days are over, but he is going to stick in the media side of things. But it's a sad to see him go. I mean, if you're a Royals fan,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a World Series champion, one-time All-Star, one-time All-Star Game MVP, four-time Gold Glover, and all of those were with Kansas City.
Yeah. It's really just an amazing player. 13-year career, played a long time. He was so great for so long. And I actually saw a funny stat. He's actually getting paid more than the Fernando Tatis this season for the Padres. So really not good for them. But yeah, he's a Kansas City Royals legend. He'll be remembered here probably forever. So
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, he was with the Royals for a while, did really good. Padres wasn't so great. He's getting paid a lot of money. And then the last few years, he's really just bounced around. I mean, he got traded from the Padres to the Red Sox last season. He actually had his homecoming, came back to Kansas City and played. And then he ended up in Chicago. Um, and or excuse me. He went from the Padres to Chicago. That didn't go very well. He got traded to Boston, and then he disappeared. Or I could be wrong. I apologize, but I know he played for those two teams at some point, and then now he's nowhere. And he's
Yeah.
been a free agent for a while, and then he had decided to call it quits.
Yep. And up
Um,
next, we got something in the NBA. This is interesting.
yeah, our last news we got going on right now is the Nets firing their head coach. Jackie Vaughn is replaced by Kevin Ollie. What does this mean for that organization?
Yeah, well, and that's to be frank, kind of suck right now. They're a pretty bad team. I mean, we obviously saw that embarrassing game against Celtics several days ago. Coming out of the All Star break, they're looking weak. The team doesn't care that they're in a rebuilding year, and they're going to be rebuilding for the next several years because of the failed Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden experiment, and really, it's just the team's in a tough spot.
Yeah,
The Vaughn, he wasn't a really good coach. Our team just didn't care, losing games. Maybe our new Coach Ollie, maybe he can lead them to have more enthusiasm about the team and try and get them at least just some momentum and some wins, you know?
yeah, I agree. Really, I say, I mean, I kind of compare the Nets to the Mets of baseball. They had all these star players. Like for the Nets, they had Kyrie Irving, and they had Kevin Durant, and they had all these star players, on their team. And they spent all this money and didn't go anywhere. And the Mets did the same thing. I mean, they signed all these players. They signed Max Scherzer. They signed Justin Verlander. Justin Verlander. They had Jacob DeGrom at one point. And then offensive side of the ball, they spent all this money on all these great players, and then ended up getting rid of them, and then they didn't really do anything for their team. Um, but I think
Yeah.
it's a good thing that they got fired him, and I think it's good that they got a new face um, of the team, and I think that'll make really just a locker room switch. I think that could
Oh,
really
yeah.
help him out.
Yeah, it really can. And I feel like it shows that the team actually cares about winning basketball games if you fire your coach in the middle of the season. Obviously, when you fire your coach right in the middle of the season, obviously something is very, very wrong with the team. Like usually in other sports, we get fired maybe a couple, like the day after the season, but in the middle of the season, you know something's just way off in that organization. And that was the right move that need to be done.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that right there. So yeah, so we're gonna move on to our next segment. That is the end of our news. Knock knock, who's there? What's hot? That is over now. Next up, on the list of on our agenda for today is Deep Under the Glass. All right, and that might be a funky name. Credits to Jeff. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have this name. Credits to Jeffrey Nold. But let's get right into it. My first question to you is, for Under the Glass segment is, do you think UConn can repeat?
I still think they have a chance. Obviously, they got obliterated by Creighton last night. I think they do have a really good chance to repeat. The offense is playing well. They just had a really weird game where their defense, that's usually great, played awful. And I think if they need to just kind of cruise a little bit the rest of the regular season. They're still going to be in one seed pretty much no matter what happens. And I think towards tournament, they start warming up, they start getting hot, and if they're going into March Madness playing good basketball, no one's going to beat them. If you're playing UConn at their best, there's not one single team in the country that's going to be able to beat them.
So yeah, going right back to UConn. Yeah, I mean, Creighton really got them in their where they play the worst is on the road. I mean, they've lost 15 in a row, on the road versus ranked opponents, which is not great. But if we take their whole season as a whole, I mean, they're 24-3. They're 5-2 versus ranked opponents. They had a 14 game win streak that did snap last night where they lost. They fell to Creighton by like 30 points or something. It was
19.
crazy. Um, but if we kind of, I think they can repeat. I really do. I mean, they're still so solid and so strong. like they were last year. And it's kind of rare actually for this to happen. The last time it happened was the Florida Gators 06, 07. Let's go to the bigger basketball league, the NBA, and the Cavs are playing really good ball right now, Jace.
Yeah.
Are they finals contenders?
I think they could be. Obviously, we've heard some reports that maybe Donovan Mitchell isn't going to come back. We'll see how that goes. But right now, they're playing great basketball. I feel like that might hinder their performance a little bit. Roster wise, they're 100% a championship contender. We'll just have to see if they can really stick it out through the playoffs, if the team can stay healthy, if the backups and bench can do their job. And really, I feel like that's what's going to depend on them winning a championship or not, because they've been so hot as of late, Caden?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, they are playing really good ball right now. I mean, they're 36 and 17. That's the best. That's the fourth best record of the league. Second best in the Eastern Conference, and they have a 2.5 game lead over the Bucks in the Central. So they're really cruising right now. One of the best teams record wise in the league, and defensively they're the best team in the league defensively. Only
Yeah.
allowing 109.2 points per game. That's number one in the league. And in a league where we've recently not seen very much defense, it's really nice to see how defensively how good they are. Um, Defensively, it's really awesome. And again, like you said earlier, I mean their stars are playing really good. Like Donovan Mitchell, he's fourth in the league in points per game with 28.4, and Jarrett Allen. I mean he's fifth in field goal percentage, 64.6. And rebounds per game, he's second in 10.6. So I mean, their star players are are stepping up, and they've also won 9 of their last 10. So they're really hot right now.
Yeah, and Caden, I got a question for you. Coming out of the All Star break of the NBA, what team, obviously other than the Cavaliers, who do you think is going to get like red hot towards the end of the season? Because we're getting towards that point where, hey, playoff basketball is coming up. We got to get our stuff together.
Honestly, I really do think that the Lakers might actually start to heat up. I know they're below 500, right? I know they've dealt with injuries this season and stuff, and LeBron's getting older, but I still think that they really could heat up. They're on quite a win streak right now. And they dealt with a lot of injuries earlier in the year. They're starting to pull it back together. I feel like they're getting a little something going. Um, and again, I mean, they have the second best basketball player of all time on their team, LeBron James. You're never out. I mean, you're never out of a
Yeah.
game. And him on your team will make it better. And Anthony Davis isn't too shabby
Yeah.
of a player as well.
Yeah, and the team I feel like is going to get hot is the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, they've been a great team all year, but they're 5-5 in the last 10. They lost three in a row heading into the All Star break, so a little bit weak. I feel like Nikola Jokic and his team are just going to get stuff figured out. Nikola Jokic is the front runner for MVP yet again, and I feel like the rest of the team's going to start to rally around him, and they're going to start to win some games. Have in the next couple of weeks, up until about middle March, they got a very easy stretch. I wouldn't be surprised if they only lose one or two games. So yeah, be prepared for them to be on the come up and just dominate the next few weeks in the NBA.
Yeah, I agree, man. And yeah, that will bring us to the end of our segment deep under the glass. So yeah, both those teams really could make it. But we'll see. We'll have to see. We'll have some updates here in the next couple weeks.
We
But
will,
let's move
Caden.
on to our final segment around the corner. All right. So in our right around the corner, we have the end of the college basketball season. So that means March Madness is right around the corner. So we got about 5 or 6 games left, really. In the regular season. At this very moment, best teams are UConn, Houston, and Purdue, who are all 24 and 2, 22 and 3, 23 and 3. So all really below 5 losses. right there. And I mean, a few large changes right now recently in the top 25. The San Diego State is heating up. They lost in the finals last year to UConn, obviously, and they're heating up. I mean, they just moved up 7 spots from unranked to
Hmm.
19th. They're
Yeah.
playing really, really good ball right now. And South Carolina falls 9 spots after 2 back-to-back bad losses. I mean, they lost 101 to 61 to Auburn.
Yikes.
And then they lost to unranked LSU, who's not ranked, 64 to 63, which was a close game, but it was an unranked opponent. They're falling off. What do you expect to see in the last few weeks?
I feel like a team that maybe could heat up a little bit is Kansas. I feel like maybe they lose maybe one more game in the regular season. I feel like once Big Ten or Big 12, excuse me, tournament comes around, I feel like they do have a shot at winning that maybe and getting a little bit hot in the March Madness. I don't feel like they're going to win the national championship, but that team is just so much talent. I mean, guys like Johnny Furphy and Hunter Dickinson are just playing incredible basketball all year. So I really feel like they have a chance to heat up. In another team, I feel like Iowa State, yeah, they just had that bad loss to Houston. I feel like they're going to keep the momentum rolling. And that just goes for most of the Big 12. They've had an incredible year in that conference. So I feel like those are some teams that we may see jump up a little bit. I feel like Iowa State maybe only 1 spot, but Kansas could go up a decent amount, I feel, even though they are already, a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah, and so we got a few teams right here who are right on the edge, like they're almost in, but they're out. Right now, Nebraska Cornhuskers, they're right on the edge. The Mississippi State Bulldogs, they're right on the edge as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Gonzaga Bulldogs, which is surprising. They're one of the best. I mean, best basketball teams is kind of a down year. They're right on the edge of making it,
Yeah.
and Ole Miss, the Rebels almost lost to Missouri, which we know Missouri have had a very down year.
Yeah.
Not great over there in Columbia, Missouri, but Ole Miss, they're knocking on the door. And the Providence Friars. So
Yep.
these 5 teams are getting close to getting there. So which of these teams do you think are going to make it?
I feel like mainly all of them, other than maybe Nebraska, will make it. I feel like Nebraska, obviously, well-known program, but it's Nebraska basketball. They're going to find a way to screw it up. They just don't have the best recruits and the best coaching. I feel like sometimes that really does, at the end of the day, just it ultimately shoot you in the foot. And I feel like they could just be lose a couple games here at the end of the year, lose in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, and just be like, all right, and the committee could just be like, get out, get out. Maybe they get in a first to 4 game or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. All those teams really have a shot. I mean, Nebraska also has a shot to get it in, but again, yeah, like you said, the program, they have a history of not being so great. But yeah, so that is going to be the end of our last segment. This will also be the end of our show. You guys can catch us once again a week from today at this very specific time at 7 p.m. Central Time. Next Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Time next Thursday. I have been Caden Simpson, and this has been Jace Perrette, and we will catch you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at GameTime Sports Podcast on both of those with the blue, or excuse me, the purple profile picture. And we will catch you guys next week. See you later.